Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you some examples of people who expressed compassion in their lives. And the first I would like to mention is the Dalai Lama. He has brought compassion to our Western world, to our Western minds, more than any other. That he does not know any antipathy is evident from this quote. If you do not practice compassion towards your enemy, then towards whom can you practice it? From the viewpoint of training altruism, an enemy is really your guru, your teacher. Only an enemy can teach you tolerance. An enemy is the greatest teacher of altruism. And for that reason, instead of hating, we must respect him. Do you understand? You don't have to practice compassion to your friends, or to your family, your dear mother. That's easy, that's a piece of cake. But what about people who think differently? People who are different, people who don't like you. Do they belong to the unity as well? Of course they do. And that requires practice for us. It means that the bully in the class also deserves our compassion. Another example, Etty Hillesum. Etty was a young Jewish woman who lived during World War II. She had the chance not to go to Camp Westerbork, a Dutch concentration camp, from where the Jews were exported to the destruction camps. However, she did go to Camp Westerbork because she thought she could help and console the people. She wrote diaries and letters from which an image emerged of a woman who did not fight against the Germans, but tried to strive for harmony. One morning, she stood together with her fellow prisoners in front of a screaming German camp guard. Everyone was cramped with fear and horror for this man. But Etty only wondered, what happened in the soul of this man? What caused him to lose contact with his inner divine core? And she showed it very clearly that screaming German is not a true man. And she wondered, what can I do to get in touch with the true human, with the true human being in that camp guard, so that he may change his miserable life? That's a fine example of compassion. You don't agree with someone's inhumane behavior, but you always try to see the true human in the perpetrator of injustice or inhumanity. So you don't vibrate with the fear and the hate of that camp guard. You keep thinking out of compassion, you're compassionate, and he was not fighting against the Germans or against the Nazis, not even fighting against inhumanity. She worked to restore harmony. Another example, Malala, a young Pakistani woman, the youngest person ever to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. She was shot in the head by the Taliban because she went to school as a girl, which the Taliban consider as a sin. But she doesn't hate the Taliban. It only strengthened her in her fight for the good. And in her case, the good was education for girls and women. That compassion is universal is also shown by the fact that she not only recognizes the Prophet Muhammad as a teacher, the prophet of her religion, but also Jesus, Buddha, Mandela, Gandhi, and others. Gandhi, I don't think we need to say much about him. He is known all over the world as the non-violent fighter for an independent India. However, he did want the occupiers of India, the English, to leave his country as friends. People often forget that he didn't fight against the English, but he fought for a just and harmonious India. For example, he went on hunger strike so that the temples would be open to all Indians, including the pariahs, the outcasts. Gandhi is the example that compassion is not a theoretical, passive affair, but that it requires action, and above all, self-improvement. Nelson Mandela is also very well known. When he left the prison on Robben Island, he realized that he had to leave hate behind him as well. Otherwise, he would remain prisoner. He was therefore not against the whites, who had invented such an unjust exploitation system as apartheid. Now he became the president of all South Africans, white, black and brown. Desmond Tutu, also from South Africa. We know him from the Truth Commission, the post-apartheid reconciliation program. There could have been some kind of hatchet day in South Africa after the abolition of apartheid. There was so much hatred among the various parties. The Truth Commission was based on the idea that society as a whole should move forward, together. And that was only possible if hatred was transformed into understanding. Now you can say, well, these are very noble people, but I'm a simple human being. This is not something for me. Now these people stand head and shoulders above the average person, that's true, but that doesn't mean that we cannot be compassionate. We can develop compassion. As good as you can learn to write and to read, or you can learn mathematics, you can also learn to practice compassion. And we want to give you some of those exercises that will help you developing compassion. The first one, imagine a society of which everyone is a part. Try to imagine what it looks like when we assume that we all come from the same source, so that we are all brothers to each other. This knowledge determines our thinking and actions. We need to form a positive idea of law, justice, prosperity and peace for everyone. That is the challenge. Try to live that ideal. Act according to that ideal. Learn to look at each other as eternally growing and learning spiritual beings. In fact, Etty Hillesum acted this way with regard to the camp card. Although he screamed, she saw in him a learning human being, in essence, a spiritual entity. When we appeal to the best in the other, we also get the best out of ourselves. You know, the way we look at someone else shapes us as a human being, but also forms the other. There is an interesting example of a school in the USA. There were 3 classes, and the teachers were told that one class consisted of very intelligent children, which was not true, it was not the case, but they thought it. Nevertheless, it turned out that the students in that class had much better grades. So the attitude of the teachers largely determined the results of the students. Imagine how people can change when you look at them and approach them in a different way, a compassionate way. Another exercise, a very inspiring exercise, I think, was given by William Quine Church, one of the Theosophical leaders of the past. Go in your thoughts, go in your mind, he says, to your friend. Consider him. Think about him, feel him, and realize that you are him. Go in your mind to all your friends, overthink them, think about them collectively and as individuals. Know you are them too. But maybe you have enemies. Maybe there are people who don't like you. Go to them in your mind and realize that you are them too. Visit in your thoughts all the people of your country. But there are many countries. Visit the people of other countries and be aware of the fact that you are them. You are Buddha. You are the Buddhas. You are divine beings. You are everything. You are everyone. You are the internal gods. You are all that lives. If you repeat these exercises several times, you will think more and more from the point of view of a great whole. And then compassion becomes a natural thing. As you become more and more capable of being compassionate, your own life will also change dramatically. Compassion is an overwhelming force that leads to several positive things. Compassion enlightens your thinking and leads to a greater inspiration. You become gentle in your judgment. You get off your bubble. Yeah? It's not your group, no, it's the whole humanity or everything that lives that is important. You are open to a greater vision. You look behind the outer man and see the inner man. That's what annihilism did. Yeah? You connected with people in the same area of thought. You start working together. Well, the last thought is very important. It has everything to do with avatars, Tulkus and Buddhas, as we will see in a while. If you develop compassion in yourself and you find connection with others who have also and even to a larger extent developed compassion, you get a group of people, a nucleus. Look, when we showed you the composition of the human being and we told that in the spirit, potentially everything exists, infinite abilities. If you realize that fact, then it's obvious that there are humans who are much more advanced than the average human being. Yes, that there are beings above the human realm who have a much greater range of consciousness and therefore live much more in the spiritual core. And that spiritual core is, as I told you, compassion. Those beings form a great community, a partnership. We call it the lodge or the hierarchy of wisdom and compassion. And their goal is to stimulate others, to inspire them, to develop compassion in themselves. They form a shield or a protective wall around mankind. They are the real teachers, the real leaders of mankind, although very few people recognize them as such. When we practice compassion, we will not only attract fellow human beings who do the same, horizontal attraction, you might say, but there is also something as a vertical attraction. We then come under the influence of that hierarchy of compassion. We become co-workers of that partnership of saints, masters, Buddhas, and gods. There is a constant attempt from that hierarchy to assert a compassionate influence in the human world. So there's always a search for contact. However, that contact can only be communication if there is an accordance in character. Only if there is something in a human being that corresponds with the characteristics of those further evolved beings, a connection can be made. In fact, there should be a kind of resonance. A human being has to be tuned in the same tone in order to be able to vibrate on that hierarchy of compassion. When we speak of Tulku of Avatãras and Buddha, after a short break, there is always an influence from a higher area to a lower area, a contact through resonance, because the receiving party, to say it like this, should have the same characteristic as the party who gives. But we will tell you that after the short break.